something strange is happening to men. The traits that once defined masculinity, strength, leadership, protection, are being dismantled. In their place, passivity, confusion, dependence. Is this just the natural evolution of man in a modern, digital world? Or is it something else entirely? In this video, we're diving deep into the cultural, institutional, and psychological forces reshaping what it means to be a man. And we'll explore a disturbing question. Is this being done on purpose? Stick around, because if this really is a plan, it's already decades in the making. Not that long ago, being a boy meant something different. It meant scraped knees and muddy sneakers. It meant riding your bike so far from home you had to guess how to get back before dinner. It meant testing your limits, and sometimes getting hurt in the process. And that was fine. That was normal. If you grew up in the 80s or 90s, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Saturday mornings were for cartoons. But the rest of the weekend? That was for building ramps out of plywood, launching bottle rockets, or disappearing into the woods with your friends until your mom yelled your name from the porch. Back then, no one tracked your location. You didn't need a helmet to ride your bike. And if two boys got into a fight, 9 times out of 10, they shook hands afterward and forgot about it the next day. Boys were expected to be a little wild, to wrestle, to explore, to screw up, and learn the hard way. They weren't punished for being physical, curious, or competitive. They were encouraged. Boy Scouts was a rite of passage. Sports were everywhere. And nearly every boy had some kind of male role model to look up to. A dad, an uncle, a neighbor, a coach. Strong men who didn't apologize for being strong. Who didn't need to talk about feelings all the time to show they cared. They taught with action more than words. But today, it's not just that those things are fading. It's that they're being erased. Outdoor play has been replaced by LED screens. Boys are now glued to tablets, gaming systems, and TikTok by the time they're old enough to speak. Real friendships, forged through dirt, danger, and shared adventure, have been replaced with usernames and group chats. And what about the men, the fathers, the coaches, the neighborhood warriors who used to guide the next generation? Many are gone, either physically absent or culturally muted. They've been replaced by influencers, by algorithms, by teachers who are told that roughhousing is aggression, that risk-taking is defiance, and that confidence is a red flag. Even the very idea of boys being boys, once a shrug and a smile, now comes with a warning label. Watch him closely. Correct that behavior. Make sure he knows that's not okay. But let me ask you something. When did we decide that being a boy was a problem? Because boys haven't changed all that much. They still want to run, to compete, to explore. But the world around them has changed, dramatically. And it no longer makes space for what they are. Is this just a byproduct of the digital age? A culture that overcorrected, trying to protect everyone from everything? Or is there something more going on here? Because once you take away real boyhood, what's left to grow into manhood? There was a time, not that long ago, when every boy knew he was becoming something. Not just older, not just taller, but a man. And everyone around him reinforced that idea. From his dad handing him his first tool, to his coach telling him to dig deep when it hurt. Even the movies told him, one day you'll be tested. One day you'll be called on to protect, to lead, to be a man. That's what kept him moving forward. The belief that there was a destination, a peak to climb, something bigger than himself waiting at the end of the struggle. Today, that peak, it's buried under noise. There's no clear path anymore. No moment where a boy is told, you've made it, you're a man now. No rite of passage, no fire to walk through. Instead, he just drifts. Think about it. When does a boy become a man in the modern world? Is it when he graduates high school? When he moves out? Is it when he pays a bill? Signs a lease? For a growing number of young men, those moments never even come. They stay at home. Not because they're lazy, but because the world they were promised doesn't exist anymore. Wages are flat, costs are through the roof, college debt is crushing, and even a so-called good job barely covers rent. So the milestones get delayed or skipped entirely. And without those defining moments, without that earned sense of arrival, a boy can live his whole life feeling like he's just pretending to be a man. But the problem runs deeper than economics, because even the very idea of manhood is up for debate now. Strength, that's threatening. Leadership, that's controlling. Providing, that's patriarchal. Ambition, that's problematic. Unless you apologize for it. So what's left? What kind of man does the world want? The answer is none. It wants compliance, not courage. Softness, not strength. Consumption, not creation. Boys today aren't failing because they're broken. They're failing because the system that once guided them, challenged them, shaped them, has been dismantled. And it didn't happen all at once. It was death by 1,000 quiet cuts. The scout leader who's no longer welcome. The coach afraid to push too hard. The father told to back off. The mentor figure replaced by a screen. These boys aren't just lost. They're untested. And untested boys don't become strong men. They stay stuck, not because they chose it, but because no one ever showed them how to move forward. And maybe, just maybe, that's not an accident. Because a generation of strong, principled men with direction and purpose. That's a dangerous thing to anyone who profits from control. So the question is, did we forget how to raise men? Or did someone make sure we did? Picture this. It's 1993. You're a kid, sprawled out on the living room floor, eating cereal straight out of the box while the TV hums in the background. On screen, maybe it's Indiana Jones or John McClane. Maybe it's Optimus Prime telling you that freedom is the right of all sentient beings. The message was simple. Be strong, be brave, protect the people you love. Even the sitcom dads, for all their corny jokes, still held the family together. Carl Winslow, Uncle Phil, Danny Tanner, even Tim the Toolman Taylor. They might have messed up, but they showed up. They led. They mattered. Fast forward to now. What do you see? Dad's a punchline. The strong male character, he's either the villain or a broken shell of a man who needs saving. The hero, if there is one, is usually sarcastic, detached, or just along for the ride. Somewhere along the line, something shifted. Masculinity didn't just fall out of favor. It became the enemy. In movie after movie, show after show, the message is clear. If you're a man, you're either dangerous or disposable. The best thing you can do is step aside, shut up, and let someone else take the lead. And this isn't just happening in Hollywood. Open a news article. Browse a trending hashtag. Masculinity is constantly linked with violence, oppression, toxicity. Now, is there such a thing as toxic behavior? Of course. But when the culture treats masculinity itself as a disease, what are boys supposed to become? If every strong male figure is framed as abusive, outdated, or problematic, then being a man becomes something to be ashamed of. And shame is a powerful tool. And now, shame has evolved into confusion. Boys aren't just being told to tone it down. They're being told they might not even be boys at all. We now live in a culture where biological reality is treated as offensive, and questioning that reality is considered dangerous. Kids are being taught that gender is fluid, subjective, and open to reinterpretation at any time, even when they're still young enough to believe in Santa Claus. This ideology is being introduced before many boys have even hit puberty. And the result is predictable. Confusion, uncertainty, and identity crises at an age where clarity and structure are needed most. It's not a stretch to say this is one of the most aggressive forms of psychological destabilization we've ever seen. Because when a boy no longer knows what he is, how can he ever become who he's meant to be? It doesn't just make people quiet, it makes them question who they are, and whether they're even allowed to be that person anymore. That's not empowerment, that's erasure. And while this shift in messaging might seem like progress to some, it raises a critical question. Why is there so much effort being spent on redefining, or outright eliminating, the idea of the strong, confident man? Why are the characters we once looked up to now mocked or deconstructed? Why does almost every ad campaign feel like it's scolding men rather than speaking to them? And maybe most importantly, who benefits when men stop seeing themselves as leaders, builders, or protectors? Because stories shape belief, and belief shapes action. If you control the narrative, you control the man. There was a time when starting a family was the natural next step in a man's life. You found someone you loved, settled down, had kids, and worked hard to give them a better future. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. These days, it's a gamble, a high-risk move with shrinking rewards. The divorce rate hovers around 50%, and when it happens, men know exactly what to expect. The courts won't ask who was loyal, who sacrificed, who showed up. More often than not, they assume one thing: mom gets the kids, dad gets the bill. Even when fathers are present, involved, and committed, they're treated like second-class parents. Custody isn't a fair split. It's something he has to fight for, and usually lose. Then comes the child support, the alimony, the legal fees that never seem to end. And if he falls behind, even for reasons out of his control, he's branded a deadbeat. In some states, even jailed. And what kind of message does that send? That men are disposable, that their role in the family is optional, or worse, replaceable. The result? Fewer men are even willing to take the risk. Ask around. More and more young men are opting out of marriage completely. Not because they don't want love or legacy, but because they've seen the fallout up close. They've watched friends lose their homes, their access to their kids, even their identity, all because a relationship didn't work out. And with the deck so clearly stacked against them, you have to wonder, is this system broken, or was it built this way? Because this doesn't just affect men, it affects everyone. Kids raised without fathers are statistically more likely to struggle in school, develop behavioral issues, and face higher rates of incarceration. Single mothers carry the weight of two roles, and communities lose the balance and strength that once came from stable, two-parent households. This isn't just a string of bad luck. It's the unraveling of the most fundamental unit of society, the family, and in its place, government programs, institutional caretakers, screens, algorithms, and medication. The roles once held by fathers, protector, teacher, moral compass, are being handed over to bureaucrats and apps. And when men step away from relationships, they don't step into nothing. They step into substitutes. One of the most destructive, pornography. What used to be a private vice is now an epidemic, available 24/7 on every screen. Men aren't just using it, they're becoming addicted to it, rewiring their brains, killing their drive, numbing their emotions. Why risk intimacy, vulnerability, or family when a digital fantasy offers all the pleasure with none of the responsibility? It doesn't just stop men from forming real relationships, it destroys existing ones. And yet again, the family unit takes the hit. Let's go back for a second. Remember when we talked about strong male providers? I'm not suggesting that men shouldn't take care of their children. They absolutely should. But society has crumbled to the point that the foundation itself is fractured. Broken relationships, fatherless homes, and a culture that treats families as disposable. It doesn't just discourage men from starting families, it punishes them if they try. And when the family breaks down, someone else steps in to take its place. In 1984, a man named Yuri Bezmenov, a former KGB agent turned defector, gave an interview that most people ignored at the time. Today, it sounds less like a warning and more like a checklist. He laid out the 4 stages of ideological subversion, a slow, methodical strategy not for military invasion, but for cultural collapse. According to Bezmenov, the stages were demoralization, break down the values and beliefs of a nation from within; destabilization, undermine the economy, foreign relations, and defense systems; crisis, trigger a tipping point, whether social, economic, or political; normalization, introduce a new normal that no one asked for but everyone is expected to accept. Sound familiar? Demoralize the culture by attacking the family; destabilize the nation by turning men into passive, powerless spectators; create crisis through media manipulation, economic insecurity, and endless division; and finally, normalize it all. Tell the public this is just how things are now. And who benefits from this breakdown? Not you, not your family, not your kids. The ones who benefit are the ones who stand to gain from a society that no longer thinks for itself, but waits to be told what to think. Because once you destroy strong men and dismantle strong families, the next step is obvious. Replace those pillars of independence with dependency. Dependency on government, dependency on international institutions, dependency on systems that promise protection but demand obedience. Look around. The void once filled by fathers is now filled by federal agencies, public schooling, social workers, and prescription drugs. Everything that used to happen around the dinner table now comes from the state. And it's not just a coincidence, it's part of a broader agenda. A shift away from sovereign individuals toward global control. The World Economic Forum has openly stated they want a future where you'll own nothing and be happy. The United Nations and World Health Organization continue expanding authority over national policy. And multinational tech companies now decide which ideas are safe and which ones are dangerous. And what do all of these institutions have in common? They don't want strong, independent men. They don't want traditional families. They don't want people who think, question, or resist. They want compliance. They want centralization. They want a global system where values, beliefs, and even gender roles are standardized, dictated from the top down. Masculinity, that's a threat to the program. And it makes sense, because the strong man provides. The strong man protects. The strong man defends his family, his land, his community, and he doesn't ask for permission to do it. A weak man? He obeys, he consumes, he accepts whatever world he's handed, because he's forgotten how to build his own. So, was this all a coincidence? A natural evolution of society? Or was it something far more coordinated and far more intentional? Because when you zoom out, the pattern is clear. And the message is simple. If you want to control a people, first break the men. It's not all bad news. They say, strong men create good times create weak men create bad times, and bad times create strong men. It's a cycle, a pendulum that's swung back and forth throughout history. And maybe, just maybe, it's starting to swing again. Because the more people who wake up to the agenda, the better chance humanity has to resist it. You're starting to see it now. Pockets of resistance forming, not through protest or politics, but through personal transformation. Men are returning to discipline, to fitness, to faith, to craft, to fatherhood, to community. They're walking away from the screen and back into the real world, starting businesses instead of chasing handouts, building their bodies instead of numbing their minds. Speaking truth, even when it's unpopular. You see it in homesteaders, in tradesmen, in fathers who are showing up, not because they were told to, but because they know it matters. These aren't perfect men. They're not influencers. They're not trying to go viral. They're just quietly rebuilding the foundation from the ground up. It's not flashy, but it's happening. And every time another man wakes up to what's been taken from him and decides to fight back in his own life, that pendulum starts to swing just a little harder. And that leads us to the final question, the one that matters most. If all of this, the erasure of masculinity, the destruction of family, the cultural rot, really is part of a larger plan, then what can we do about it? So let's take a step back. We've looked at the war on boys, the collapse of male identity, the dismantling of the family, and the rising influence of global forces that want obedient citizens, not free individuals. The signs aren't subtle anymore. They're everywhere. And now the question isn't, is this happening? The question is, what are you going to do about it? Because this isn't just a story about society. It's about you, your choices, your family, your future. Men, what are you doing in your personal life to resist the changes being forced on you? Are you building strength, finding purpose, becoming someone your future family can depend on? Women, what are you doing to support the return of the values that held society together for generations? Are you encouraging leadership, honoring tradition, teaching the next generation that masculinity and femininity are both essential, not enemies? This moment isn't just about survival, it's about legacy. And if you're still watching, you're probably one of the few who refuses to go quietly. So don't. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell us how you are pushing back, how you're winning small battles in a world that's trying to convince you to stop fighting. Because together, we can turn this conversation into action. And this collapse into a turning point. The system wants you broken. Let's prove it wrong. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.